morning, everyone. A lot of you know me, obviously, and my work so far, but I was just saying to Jonathan, it's been quite an interesting exercise to start a talk and review one's own practice from the position of 3 pieces of work that are in the household name exhibition, and to sort of trace backwards and look at the threads, literally, of this, this newish work for me, even though, I've been working on it, since 2019, really. And then obviously the exhibition was postponed. And it was a good job, really, because I was really up to the wire. Zena knows I was sort of trying to finish a rug and build steps. And I think it would have been a miracle, actually, if we got it done. Would have got it done, but anyway, it was really wonderful to be asked to be in this show. And it's so important to have exhibiting opportunities. I spend a lot of time facilitating and curating and exhibitions, and to be, sometimes my own practice gets kind of put to the side. And so it's so important. It's so important to be connected to that dialogue of actually producing work that, I think I'm always making work, in a sense. I'll move on to the next slide. This is currently on show, for those who don't know, at Elysium Gallery in Swansea. And that's kind of one of the views as you walk in. The first piece you encounter is this rug that I made, which, does what it says on the tin, I suppose. I wanted it to be, like a mark on the floor, really. And it's funny because it's laid there on top of the remnants of another sort of structure that was part of the building's history. And the piece is very much about traces and histories of lives lived in spaces and in buildings. And it was a really intense process to make. I was using tools. Oh, I'm going straight into the other pieces in the show. There's my mum standing next to the steps. That is the other piece in the show. And that's called You Must Fall Into Step. And this is a photograph called Epona and Foal, which is not a new piece. So the 2 new pieces that I made were the rug and the steps. And it took hours and hours and hours, days and days and days to make this. I'd never made a rag rug before. But I just really wanted to kind of mark my presence. And I don't know how I came across the idea of making a rug. But it was the idea of etching my name when Zena asked me to be in the show and, asked us all to respond to the idea of the household name. I kind of set myself the question, well, what will be left of me? What is my name in this house where, once I'm gone? And the idea of people sort of scrawling their name into the foundations of buildings, into the concrete, or writing something on a wall that's then papered over, these sort of histories of lives. And I kind of wanted to make my mark in that way, and it was a bit of a kind of pun on the idea of so and so was here, and I wanted to spell it properly. I know that much. I didn't want the joke to be about Kilroy was here. It was about me being here, most definitely here with a capital H, And and I'd inherited these rag rugging tools. Well, Josh had inherited these rag rugging tools from his grandmother. And they're beautiful Victorian, I should get a picture of them, really, but just the most beautiful objects. I didn't know how I was going to make them, but the history of making rag rugs is really interesting because, you know, it's using the fabric of the house. So it's what you had left over. So it might be the children's clothes, and, you know, particularly, you know, as children grow out of clothes or things wear out, so you can reuse. It's very much about, you know, I suppose part of it was the idea of wanting to, yeah, use objects that have aged and give them some sort of continued life, really. And that sort of seemed to fit the idea behind the work. Each sort of section that you can see of grey is their tea towels from MADE Gallery Cafe that can get repeatedly worn out and yeah, turn grey. And I suppose it reminded me of like when you get rocks in sedimentary rocks and Jurassic rocks and timelines, that you get these sort of layers of sediment put down and like over centuries. And that's kind of reminded me of that. But I wanted something to break the layers. So I was thinking about naming on objects and in the house. And the only thing I've ever consciously named in the house were the children's clothes when they, you know, school clothes. So I got some ribbons made of all our names in the house. So there's Josh, Connie and Arthur, and of course me. And the children and Josh make these kind of lines that are going through the script, as it were. And yeah, it's about, they're like these markers, really. There's me making it. As you can see, that section there would have taken a good solid 4, maybe 6 hours. So I was sort of doing that in the evenings, trying to, you know, around the day. And there's a big X on there because at one point, I think that's before I decided to put Zoe Was Here on it, and I didn't quite know whether my name was going to be on there, in what form my name would be there, rather, because I felt a bit egotistical somehow, sort of putting Zoe Was Here. But then I really, you know, thought that that's the point, isn't it? It's kind of about me marking my time. And yeah, so I'm going back through the work. I was thinking, where's this text, you know, where's it come from? And I realized that in a lot of my work in the past, it's very much to do with encountering the entrances, the interface between spaces and kind of thresholds. And going back through my work, I found this piece that I did from 2012. It was part of an exhibition that was curated by Sarah Anoyle in a house in Roath. And it was part of this series of artists allowing work to be made in the domestic environment. So this is where she was living, and she invited sort of 7 or 8 artists to come in and make work directly in the house. And Sarah and I were talking about the kind of graffiti. So here we go, graffiti again, sort of etched on walls in toilet cubicles and things that people choose to put on, you know, walls. And oh, somebody's trying to come in. I'm just going to let them in. Excuse me. So yeah, I was thinking about that and came up with a phrase. I'm only, shut up, I'm only looking out for you. Somebody wrote something and somebody got upset about it, and then somebody retorted on the wall, I'm only looking out for you. And then I thought about this idea of I'm only looking out for you as being, you know, a nurturing thing, a caring thing, and how it would be great for the house to sort of speak, really, because it's usually, you know, seen as a maternal thing. Yeah, that's my daughter Connie standing in front of it, and that's it from the inside. So I literally got some tracing paper, and I didn't really have any money to make a sort of stencil or a vinyl, and I felt that I'd like to use a sort of material of the home. So I used Vaseline, which of course is part of kind of skincare, and yeah, so I made a stencil. And oops.
Need to go for wash now, please, Ryan.
We've got a noisy.
It's 8, so I need you to do it.
Oops. Can I ask everyone to put themselves on mute if possible? As I can't. I'm going to just stop the share a minute. Everyone's on mute. Good. Okay. Oh, I've lost my presentation now. Whoops. That's not it. There it is. Yeah, moving on. Yeah, so this idea of thresholds is obviously quite strong. You know, the doormat is the thing that you walk over to come into a house. The idea of that as being quite an important space. And yet,
Zoe,
yeah,
sorry, Zoe, your presentation hasn't come up on the screen. It's a job application or something.
Oh, is it? Okay, we don't want that, do we?
If you need a reference, though, you know.
Yeah, I'm just wondering where it is now. Oh, that is it. Has it come up now?
Yeah, the church, St. Martin's Church slide.
Yeah. Phew. Yeah. So yeah, I realised it's a lot of things about thresholds of these important spaces where you kind of, it's your private space, and you've got your house is kind of your space, and then there's the public space, and these thresholds are these spaces where people cross, you know, and it's this negotiation of bodies really and spaces that I think is really interesting. And I realize that's there in a lot of the work going back. So going back to this time in 2012, it was a really, really productive period for me. It's the last time I think I was in about 3 shows in that year, and firing on all cylinders really, and making work. Really, it was Sarah who invited me to be in this show in the house that just opened doors literally for me. The fact that I could make work within the domestic environment, make art, and that was about my world, my kind of environment, as a, you know, as a subject for making art, and to have it located in an actual house was really brilliant. But yeah, this is a doorstep at Sarah's house, and looking down, we were having a conversation about our fathers and found a cigarette burning on the ground, and there was nobody there. We picked up the cigarette, and it was a gitan. And Sarah kind of froze on the spot and said, "My father smoked gitans." There was no father present. So we started talking about our fathers. My dad had recently died. And this middle piece is a piece in a cloister in a church in Cardiff. And it's the piece, really, it was very strange actually, because everybody ended up making work about their dads. After my father died, I started seeing feathers everywhere. Well, not everywhere. Important conversations, outside buildings. Here's my cousin coming in. Hi, Abby. I'm so glad you can join us. I'm really glad you're here. I'm just talking about making work about quite personal encounters and idea of thresholds, and talking about loss really, and signs, and how we cope with loss, how we cope with kind of personal stuff, and making that the subject for your work. I felt that in my own practice, I can only really make work when it really matters to me, and it's something I need to maybe process or make sense of, or I kind of feel compelled to talk about it, to share. It's probably got a lot to do with my mental health. You know, if I didn't make this work, I'd probably crumble. So it's kind of an essential thing, my artwork. It's an essential part of my living, and yeah, being alive really. So yeah, this deals with loss and death, and the death of our fathers. So Sarah's father is caught on a security camera in the corner on a video screen. My father is represented by a white feather that's lit like a godly object, an apparition, a wonderful divine present on the floor in this church, in this cloister. And actually somebody stole the feather. it's annoying me because you can't see this wonderful, I don't know if you can see the picture. Can you see that now? Oh, that's better. You can see that's the feather on this polished floor that made a kind of butterfly in the reflection. It was quite a beautiful thing, and somebody stole it. Yeah, which obviously I didn't mind. I was really pleased that somebody had taken the feather, because it obviously meant something to them as well, you know, that they thought it was something really special. Maybe it's somebody coming out of church and saw this thing and just took it, you know. But I spent ages going around Roath Park trying to find big enough feather to represent a kind of angel wing feather. So yeah, but that show was named after the idea of seeing signs, structures in, you know, the random everyday, and that goes back to this sort of structures of things in life that I think you have as emotional scaffolding to just get through difficult stuff in life. Some people pray, you know, we all have our thing, but I particularly, after my dad died, I needed a structure really to kind of understand his continued presence, really, or the presence of spirit somewhere. And these were little conversations I had with the unknown, really. Every time I saw a feather, I was, you know, greatly comforted, and yeah. I don't know how to move it on now. Oops. Can everyone still hear me?
Yeah, Zoe, hi, it's Abby. Sorry I'm late.
Oh, no worries.
Yes, can hear you.
Hi.
Hi, darling.
Hi. Yeah, so this is again dealing with grief. I suppose I started really making art again, having done painting and stuff at college and photography, and then going into set design and all sorts of stuff after college, and then film and various other things. And it was really becoming a mother, and that whole experience of radical body change and life change, that almost overwhelming, really, that I kind of needed to log it and try and make sense of it all, really. And I sort of parked that for a bit until I met Eve Dent, and I'll come on to that in a minute. She's here. But yeah, I realized that from 20, you know, within 3 years, I'd born 2 children and lost my father, you know, the pretty massive events in my life, you know, birth and death, all within a space of, 3 years. So I needed to deal with it, really, and I wanted to make work about it. So that's what a lot, going back to why I make work, and this is what it's all about. It's about big stuff, you know, life. So I got a Creative Wales Award in 2013. It was very much preceding a lot of the work that's in the Household Name Show, really. It's, you know, I spent time in France drawing this wall, this stone wall of this house, and did this massive drawing on the table, life size, really, of these stones. And it was really a response to, again, grief. You know, why is it that buildings last longer than people? And that sort of, anyone who's lost anyone knows that you go through stages in grief, and one of them is anger and rage, really, and, you know, wanting to kick the walls, and, you know, and then I suddenly realized that these walls are kind of containers of lives, and what do they know of lives? What have they seen? What do they absorb? What do they hold? What can they tell us? And that they kind of like radiators in a way. My dad was obsessed with walls. He was always building walls. He was building stone walls, dry stone walls. And so I decided to make this work about walls. I knew there was something in there. I wanted to build a wall, an actual wall made of bricks that I was going to make out of lace. Don't quite know why. It was this idea of this sort of fragile structure, like cells almost. And I found these recordings of my dad recording my grandmother in like 1980. She would have been 80. And she was talking about her childhood in like, 1910. And it was, to hear my father's voice again was extraordinary. It was kind of, and my grandmother. So I decided to make these boxes like speakers, as if the walls could speak, really. And it was quite funny because I'd got this money and I was going to make this wall, but the laser cutting machine to make these lasered sort of lace boxes was going to cost a fortune, and they didn't have the wherewithal to do it in time. So I ended up, instead of it having like 1,000 bricks, I ended up with like 12 and made these sort of this helix shaped structure that's in the middle there that you can see. And inside them were speakers, and there were different voices. There was my father, my grandmother, my cat, the hum of the fridge, the fabric of my life, really, and my histories. And then I said I realised I needed something to connect all of this. And a wall, and the biggest wall I could think of was the wall that surrounds the estate in Wiltshire in Corsham, where my family gather every year and have done since the 1950s to have a picnic together and kind of you play a game of cricket and you chat. We do that every year, and there's this amazing stone wall. So I walked the length of this wall with a camera and basically projected it in the gallery space, and it's continually moving, and it was like a kind of vertigo, really, and it needed a sound. So I went to the graveyard where our grandfather Abbey is buried, and recorded the sound of the churchyard. And it was amazing because this wind sort of picked up under the yew tree that's next to the grave, and it took off and it made this incredible sound. So that was the sound of the walls moving. And then inside, as you got nearer to the bricks, there were sensors, and they tripped on your presence, and then they would speak. It's something I needed to make. I'm not sure if it was really realised, but yeah, it might be an ongoing piece. So moving on, walls, here are the boxes. And yeah, I realised it was this kind of double helix. It was kind of literally life in a box. And shadows and lace kind of are recurring things in my work. Lace is a kind of fragile thing, bricks as a cells almost. And talking about biography, really, and right back to that's in my late 20s, that kind of cartoon strip. I did an autobiographical cartoon. I was sort of getting quite ill with a thyroid condition, and the symptoms were the same as being in love. I was having heart palpitations and all the rest. I wasn't sure if it was love or whether it was my physical condition. So I did this whole strip called The Anatomy of Relationships. And I did it privately, and I ended up sending some cartoons to a magazine, and they actually wanted to run the strip. It was the Observer or something, no, Independent. And I completely freaked out and didn't publish them. They sort of wanted me to produce one every week. And I realized that, your fiction doesn't write life, I had a boyfriend who said, Zoe, life's not a cartoon. And I thought, well, yeah, it is actually, sometimes it is. Anyway, so that's biography is something that goes back deep. Yeah, making my mark. I was here. Yeah, motherhood, as I say, was something that kicked off my art practice again, really. Stuck on the sofa for hours on end, breastfeeding, and just with a mobile phone to hand, I was filming the shadows on the wall. And it's interesting seeing Raji's beautiful photographs that are in Household Name. Very much reminds me of, spending hours filming and watching the projections of light coming through onto the wall. And those shadows were beautiful during the day, and at night kind of slightly terrified me. A lot of it was to do with the fact I hadn't named Arthur, who's the baby. And I was terrified that a presence was going to come in from the windows where these shadows were coming from onto the wall and take him somehow. There was going to be some kind of, you know, occupation of him. And I realized I was probably going through sleep deprived form of some kind of psychosis at the time, probably postnatal depression, maybe not postnatal depression, postnatal anxiety of some kind, and really didn't talk to anybody about it, absolutely nobody, not my partner, not the health visitors. And really I was looking for some way of dealing with this and coming to terms with it. Was I mad? Was it supernatural? So I made this film. I was given a residency at what is Made Gallery now is Milkwood at Aptley. And I was given a residency in the basement for 6 weeks. And I found this doll, which is actually here. Yeah, like a Tiny Tears doll. And I animated it photograph by photograph by moving this old doll and photographing it. And the doll basically is frightened because the mobile, there's a fairy and it kind of visits the child and tells it its name. And I realized, you know, there are lots of myths around the myth of the changeling, various things in lots of cultures around that. But yeah, it was real for me. It really was real. And I realized, you know, a lot of it had to do with Arthur's naming. So yeah, motherhood being this massive thing, really, couldn't not make work about it, couldn't not talk about it. It's so overwhelming, and yet nobody seems to make work about it as far as I could see at the time, or it wasn't being shown in art galleries. You know, couldn't talk to people at the soft play about how I was feeling. And then I met, you know, Eve Dent, and she was pregnant at the time in the kindergarten at the Steiner School. And it was like, hey, can we talk? Can I talk about being a mother? I'd really, really like to make work with your belly, if possible, because I knew that she'd sort of been making work with her body in spaces and citing her own body. I'd, you know, seen, well, I'd heard, kind of knew of Eve up a chimney in Andre Stitt's house, actually, with bits of soot, you know, falling down from inside the chimney where she was, and seen, you know, and I just thought, right, we need to make work about bellies. But Eve gave birth before I was able to cast her belly, and this piece here is about you know, the body, the pregnant maternal body is this sort of furniture that nurtures things, and those are actually a chair that I gave birth with to Connie, and Arthur tried to give birth to Arthur with as well. So they're kind of my sort of talisman chairs. And after, you know, Josh said we're not having any more, I asked if he'd weld them together and make this kind of surrogate figure, which is essentially the maternal body. And that is a cast of my friend's pregnant belly, another friend, and that leaked milk. And it leaked milk in France. It was part of this fertile body exhibition that we curated and took a whole load of work to France, which was about the fertile body. And Anne Jordan was in that as well, who is also here tonight. I don't know, why is it not moving on? Okay. Yeah. I don't know how I'm doing for time, Jonathan, but please say if I'm, you know, getting close and I can speed up a bit. No, so
you're right.
Going back to the mum thing, and this is back to mine again. This is one of my first forays into performance, really. So it was incredible, really. So, as I say, Sarah had invited artists into her house to make work, and Josh, who's my partner, wired the piano in the living room up across the ceiling. He strung it from the piano keys up through one room, across the ceiling, and to the kitchen cupboards. And we had this plan Josh had made me this dressing gown, which says mum, you know, as you can see, says mum on the back. And I decided to do this performance on the opening night where I'd I'd come down in the middle of the private view in my dressing gown and start washing up. And nobody really knew that this was a planned thing or a performance. You know, they actually thought I lived there. And as I played did put the washing up away and slammed cupboard doors, etc., and played a tune on the piano. That was a really nice thing to do, to work with my partner. Arthur, my son, also made work in the house. He found toys that belonged to the children who lived there part-time because their parents were separated. And so he found these toys, which I sort of cling filmed the toys as well, as they were sort of being kept fresh and safe for the children to return. And Arthur went into the garden and placed these toys. Connie, again, my daughter here in the middle, that was a piece I did as part of Made in Roath down a lane. That is very much to do with childhood and my own dressing up box clothes. She is wearing the same clothes that I wore as a child, and I literally hoisted her up, didn't give her much warning. I said, Connie, you know, would you like to be hoisted up and, you know, on a harness, and you've got to keep really, really still. Do you think you can do that for mum? And she was like, yeah, I can do that. And so she's skipping, obviously, and she's suspended, not that high, you know, it wasn't dangerous. If she'd fallen, it wouldn't have hurt her. Yeah, she was really up for it. It was quite exciting. So it was part of this nocturne art trail as part of Made in Roath, and people encountered Connie suspended in a lane, down the lane where I used to play, and frozen in time, as it were. So again, this idea of like lives lived, of aging, of passages, of growing up, of the, you know, kind of wanting to capture that moment of childhood and my own children growing up. And that's just a picture of Josh, who's, you know, made these amazing stairs that feature in Household Name, and Laura's twins peeking around the corner. So yeah, my work as a artist, again, as I say, really took off with Motherhood and meeting Eve, and we made this piece of work together called Breast Cups, which comprised of a sculptural installation, I suppose. There's a blancmange breast that you can see in the dome that's made out of breast milk collected from Eve's body, and who was nursing Isla. And it was very much quite a political piece, really, in reaction to people's responses to us breastfeeding in public. I got quite negative reactions when I was in the park, told to put them away. So it's very much about this idea about taboos, politeness. So there's doilies, there's a formal setting. The still that you can see was we took the piece we performed it in Cardiff at the Experimentica in Chapter, and Eve sits down at the table and feeds Isla, and one breast is feeding Isla, and the other breast is pumping milk into a vessel down a tube that I am collecting in these jugs that are literally cast from Eve's breasts, and they're sort of covered in lace, and you can see one on the left hand side. So it's a pun on jugs and breast cups and lacy bras, and they're actually sort of these jugs. And then I collected the milk, and then I made tea and served tea to the audience and offered the milk. And in France, we did it in a square. It was great, actually. People didn't really know what the hell was going on. You know, we're in this very beautiful ancient village tourist sort of spot in the Place, you know, the big, you know, central space, and near a bar. And I think but they took it on board, you know. People tried the milk. I don't think that would happen in Britain. And really that kind of led to us becoming formalized as an organization, because a lot of people were saying to us, you know, we need to see work. There's not much work out there made by mothers. And so that was why the Mothersuckers Project sort of carried on, really. And, you know, as part of our mission is to find other networks, other women making work around this subject. And that sense of kind of solidarity, there is a solidarity, but there's also that idea that, you know, that is valid. You know, you can make work around this. It's important, needs to be talked about. There's just a massive gap in public consciousness around the experience of maternal experience, in terms of, you know, this radical transition in your body, and really about changing states, and coming to terms with that. So yeah, coming back to another piece, well, really that happened in a house, an old house, again, a Victorian house. It was being knocked down, and Fizzy Events got in touch about, as part of Brickstock Festival, and said, would you like to take over this house and bring artists in? And it was, yep. So I basically invited 10 other artists to come into the space and start with their own room and then work out from that room. And the idea was that although you would create work within the space and in response to the space, and in response to the idea of home and what home meant, there was no sort of authored, you know, this is my piece, this is your piece, that there would be performances within the work around the whole house, and that how we'd negotiate the audience throughout this house was also part of the work. So it was presented as a kind of house viewing, as if by a fake estate agent who met the groups at the door at an arranged time and came and wandered around the house and wandered around the rooms. And this was as I was sort of engaging with the house and wondering how I was going to make work in the space and what was it that I was going to do in this space, I realized that the layout of the building was very similar to the house I grew up in as a child. And so I started to sort of map the house and walk around the house as if I was a child again. And then I suddenly remembered that as a kid, I used to do this thing with Chrissy, my identical twin, where we'd come down the steps and we started off going left, right, left, right, left, right. And we'd have to do it in step. And we tried that a couple of times. And then Chrissy, I think we got bored, and we also tried to do a twin type language because we thought that's what twins should do. But the problem is this kind of repetition and having to do things in a certain order kind of carried on with me. I developed basically obsessive compulsive tendencies, which got quite out of hand. You know, I would have to go up the stairs a certain way. I'd have to do it twice, maybe 3 times, maybe 4 times. And then it would sort of get more and more, you must do this or something bad will happen, you know, like, so I'd flush the loo and I'd have to get to the end of the corridor before the flush ended or something bad would happen. And really it got to quite extreme, you know, I was having to kind of go up steps and back down again about 14 times. And I thought, right, that's okay, I can't do this, you know, that's just ridiculous. And I think my logical brain kicked in and just went nut. And but I realized, you know, it would be a great way to get around this house would be to have orders or commands from the house. And really it was about anxiety, I suppose, and fear of the unknown. And in the house, you know, a place where I felt safe. I don't understand why I was so conscious of this sense of fear about something that was intangible. So it reads, you must fall into step or something bad would happen. And this was as you were coming down the stairs. So you would be following, you'd be consciously not wanting to tread on the text because text is important. And then you'd end up, because it shifts, you'd end up sort of almost not falling into step. And then it kind of created a sort of anxiety about getting up the stairs. And then basically as you came to the top of the stairs, the carpet said run, and then you ran past the toilet, and the toilet had a sound coming out of the toilet that was massive sound. So, and then it said, yeah, run. And then there was another room where there was a kind of safe space, which is Cree in the playground terminology. And in this space were these heads. I'll talk about a bit more about that. So this is Eve in this photograph on the right, Eve, who's here tonight, the other Mothersucker. And she did this amazing piece where she started in the live performance during the house viewing, where she started in the bottom room and negotiated her way around the house without touching the floor. So she climbed the stairs, climbed around the walls, literally. And there's a piece that Josh did in the house, which is, finishing off the banister with the kids' Lego. So it was really nice. It was very much about what do we see as home, what's safe, what's there are lots of different responses in the space. And so I filmed Christabel and myself as these spinning heads, and they just said there is no sanctuary, and they turn, because Cree is the safe space. And I was thinking about sanctuary, and that in Logan's Run, that film from the 70s, the safe place is sanctuary, and there's this head going, there is no sanctuary. And it was really creepy, actually. It was quite dark. And we filmed it and projected it through an old video recorder and then onto these televisions that I had as a child, and Josh found one in the attic, and so there were these two spinning heads. So Maternal Attitude was this conference of coming together, really, of 3 years ago, which had organised with the University of South Wales, Emily Underwood-Lee, who's also been researching maternal practice and performance, and Eve and I obviously have been researching kind of other artists out there, working with domestic and maternal, and Zena being one of those artists who was also, showing her work at MADE at the time of this conference, did a presentation of her work. There she is there, talking about her work with me, interviewing her, we're both dressed as characters from her paintings. So at that conference, Zena asked if I'd, as a curator, to maybe see if the steps would work in that exhibition. And I said, funnily enough, I thought, make it into sculpture, and how would that happen, and how could that work? Obviously in the house, you were coming down the steps, you're actually able to climb them, and in a gallery it perhaps wouldn't be practical or safe. I had kind of thought it'd be nice to do that and to recreate the performance. Maybe Eve could have recreated the climb, but it practically, it would have been a massive sort of object, and I realized that it would just look like something's taken from one space, a staircase, and stuck in the desert. It would be surreal, but not necessarily that interesting. So it needed warping, really, and thought about changing the perspective on it. So actually I enlisted the help of a good friend of mine who actually worked on, with my dad on some of his artwork, which he also worked on a staircase with my dad, which I only found out later. But I realized that it would kind of work if you were able to mimic the movement of walking up or down the stairs, and that you needed a kind of lead. So if the text could light up, it would maybe perform that function, which is why it was conceived as a sort of giant light box. I say giant because it's the biggest light box I've ever made or seen. There's Josh in MADE, when MADE was shut during lockdown, was able to reclaim MADE as a studio space and take it over. It just timed really, really well with, the schedule of the show being postponed, and actually having the space and time to do it. There's Josh making it. And obviously you're in a pandemic, and it took on a whole nother resonance, really. You must fall into step or something bad will happen. Well, the bad thing was happening, people were getting ill. It was sort of threw up connotations of, doing the right thing, a kind of top-down sense of authority in the face of foreboding fear, all of those sort of things. And it felt quite, what's the word? Like that sort of authoritarian, bombastic, like something out of 1984, and it should be painted grey, really, as some horrible, authoritarian message or something, propagandist thing. That then I realized that, you know, I wanted to see the work as it had been originally conceived. And for some reason, the red and the white was really important. It like had to stay. So I tried to paint it red and white and it just didn't work. So then the gray came back in and there it is. It was really hard to paint. It was a real masking tape fight, basically. So yeah, on to the third piece, which is Arthur there suckling on my fertile goddess persona as Epona. This photograph made an outing in the Fertile Body exhibition back in France, and yeah, I was sort of looking at with the concept of the show was looking at pieces in museums in Wales and in this very provincial museum in southwest France that to do with fertility and then making new work in response to it. And so I was looking at the Mary Lloyd and the horse goddess in Welsh culture, in Celtic culture. The goddess is the goddess of fertility, and yeah, interestingly, all the myths and customs around the Mary Lloyd, is about knocking on the door and being allowed in or not allowed in. This fight, kind of verbal punko or fight happens. You can't come in. Yes, I can. You can't. And then they get let in, and it's happens at New Year. So it's very much, a time of change and expectancy, and fertility as a concept has been incorporated into all sorts of foundations like walls and buildings and many sort of cultures. That's something that Eve and I have talked a lot about, women incorporating the fertile body into the fabric of houses. So yeah, in terms of household name, the figure of the horse is kind of occurring quite a lot. You've got Laura's horse, Fern's film of her children with the Mary Lloyd as well. So it just seemed fitting that this, Zena felt it was right that this piece of work should join in, really. And that's the final piece in the show. That's it.